Hi there. Welcome to another edition of TokStocks. I'm your host, Keir Reynolds, and today we're lucky enough to have Gwen Preston, VP Communications with West Red Lake Gold. Trades on the TSX Venture Exchange with the ticker WRLG. Hey, Gwen, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Keir?
I'm fantastic. Where in the world have we caught you today? I know you've been a world traveler. We've been trying to fit this in for a couple of months. Where have we found you today?
I am in Stockholm. I just landed here about 5 hours, not even 5 hours ago. Came to the hotel room, crashed out for 45 minutes, went for a run to try and rejig my clock, and now I'm chatting with you. So yeah, there's a conference here over the next 2 days called Nordic Funds and Mines. So we'll talk to some Nordic funds and some miners.
Excellent. Well, I wish you good luck with that conference. And again, thank you very much for setting aside a few minutes here for us to get sort of caught up. You know, I've been a big fan of West Red Lake for quite a while. Been a big fan since you joined the team. And oh boy, gosh, it probably feels like a long time now since you joined. And you've gone through, you started off, getting thrown into the frying pan sort of right away. A lot of scrutiny on the company. When are you going to produce gold? And by golly, you guys just put out a news release and you guys are producing some gold. So maybe before we kind of dive into all that and let you sort of talk to us about what you want to chat about, maybe for those of my viewers that aren't familiar with you or the company, could you give a little background on both?
Yeah, for sure. So West Red Lake Gold the idea for the company started maybe 3 years ago. And that's when our president and CEO, Shane Williams, who's like a longtime experienced mine builder, got to know Frank Justra. And the two of them realized that they shared two outlooks. One, that there would be a gold bull market coming, and the other, that the best way to create leverage to a rising gold market is to build a company that goes from small to mid-tier, a rising gold producer in a gold bull market. I mean, that's a playbook that Frank has done a couple times before to great success. And so they decided that that's what they wanted to do for this gold bull market. And they had that additional layer where this gold equity market's been pretty bad for quite a long time. So the additional layer is that there probably aren't going to be very many new and rising gold producers in this market, because lots of projects just stopped in their tracks during the slog. And so that was 3 years ago. So then the idea was go out, find an asset that had two characteristics: could be put into production relatively quickly. That was a key one, and that's a hard one to find. And secondly, where they saw the ability for it to get larger with time. That's something that most of us look for in projects. And so they found that in the Madsen Mine, which is in the middle of Canada in Red Lake, Ontario, super historic and current high-grade gold district. Madsen has its own history. This is a mine that produced 2 million ounces of gold historically, 40s, 50s, and 60s, shut down with the low gold price in the 70s. A couple things happened in the interim. Then from 2014 to 2022, a company that may ring bells for people, Pure Gold, bought the mine and did a bunch of very good work, did 180 kilometers of drilling to define 2 million ounces of gold, 1.7 million of those ounces at indicated confidence, grading 7.4 grams per ton gold, all in and around that historic mine. And then they permitted it and engineered it and financed it and built it and put it into production. Unfortunately, that team didn't have expertise in the second half of that work, the building and operating side of mining. And so they really cut corners in that process. And those corners were significant. And so unfortunately, their version of the Madsen Mine went bankrupt after only 14 months of commercial operation. So the short version of that story is this is a mine that went down in flames exactly 3 years ago in October of 2022. But when we looked at it, or the West Red Lake team looked at it, it's a mine with a very nice resource that we really had confidence in, with a lot of the infrastructure that's needed, with permits, with growth potential. It had what we were looking for. So about 7-8 months after that bankruptcy, West Red Lake walked away as the owner of the Madsen Mine, and then spent 2 years, from mid-2023 to mid-2025, doing the work to address the things that had gone wrong last time. And so that culminated in us turning this mine back on in the middle of the year, at the beginning of June. And so we've been ramping this thing up for the last 4 months, and we have another couple months of ramp up ahead of us as we do the things that we need to do to get this thing totally operating the way that we want it to operate. And we're producing gold. And I joined the company a year and a half ago. I lose track of time. I think it was a year and a half ago. And it's interesting. You say it's been a long time, and yeah, there's been a lot to do in that time. I'm just as excited right now about West Red Lake as I was when I started. Yes, there's been moments that have been a lot of work, for sure, but nothing good happens without hard work. That sounds very cheesy, but I really believe it. And like, this team is building something very cool. We're building a production hub in Red Lake that's going to be significant. Like, by 2028, we're going to be producing 100,000 ounces a year in Red Lake. That's significant, from high grade gold in a premier jurisdiction in Canada. And then we're going to see if we can grow beyond Red Lake as well. This is a team that has that initial vision to become a rising gold producer, become a mid-tier gold miner in this market. That remains what's driving us today. And so it's really exciting. We're excited to be ramping up Madsen up. It's methodically stepping along, doing what it needs to do. And there's a lot more excitement ahead as well.
Excellent. Well, you skipped over an important part, a little bit about who you are. You know, I'm a big fan of the work that you did before and what brought you to this. And one of the reasons why I really took a second look at West Red Lake was because of you joining. So just if you wouldn't mind, I know people don't like talking about themselves, but talk about yourself.
Thank you, Kara. So I joined the company. I shut down a business, my own business, to join this company. And that business was that I'd spent 10 years writing a newsletter. It was called Resource Maven. And I wrote about what I was doing with my junior mining investment portfolio to a subscriber audience, with the premise being that, you know, there's a lot of cool opportunity in junior mining, but it takes knowledge, it takes time, and it takes a network to find the stocks that, you know, have that outsized potential. And so I did that for 10 years. It was a really cool 10 years. I came to that from a previous sort of 7 years as a journalist in mining. So I've visited projects all over the world for a longer career than I might want to name in exact numbers. Unfortunately, I just did give the numbers, so now you can add them up. But anyways, I've visited a lot of projects. I've met a lot of people in mining, all the different kinds of people, all the different kinds of projects. And I joined West Red Lake because I was excited about that investment thesis. You know, I wanted something that was a tangible, like something I could really sink my teeth into, and where we were going to create like significant value in this market. So yeah, that's the backstory there.
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing that. So since we last chatted back in May. Seems like the world's kind of changed a lot for both your company as well as sort of the backdrop of sort of the metals environment. We thought it was good in May. We thought it was good 6 months prior, but boy, golly, it looks like gold just earlier sort of breached 4,000 momentarily, trading just a hair shy of $4,000 an ounce. I couldn't even sort of imagine that when we were kind of, just starting to chat a year and a half ago.
$4,000 was always that number that, like, if people named it, you kind of, even a year ago, you were like, that's a gold bug. But now it's like,
it's kind of like we were chatting before. It's kind of like Fight Club. We don't talk about Fight Club. So
the first rule.
Yeah, first rule, let's not talk about it, but we did. So one of the major things that happened, and you kind of just touched on it in your sort of intro, is you guys officially restarted the mine at Madsen, and you're ramping up to full commercial production. Maybe you could sort of congrats on that major milestone. How does it feel to be sort of producing gold? And maybe you could like walk us through what does that mean by restarting production, and when do you think you'll sort of what are the steps that are required to get to commercial production?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for asking. It's really like the question of the moment because, we say we're starting up the mine. That was sort of right at the end of May. And understandably, investors are like, sweet, the mine's now going. And you're like, it is, but it does take a lot to, step it methodically towards the operation as intended. And so when it's for Madsen, the things that were really important, you start producing because for us, we started producing because we had access to enough areas that we could start mining. And, in our shareholders' interest, it was important for us to start generating cash, not rely only on capital markets to continue funding this preparation for mining. So we had access to enough areas. The mill had been tested. We had tested our approach to mining the deposit, right? We did that bulk sample where we compared what our model said the tons were going to carry with what they actually carried. And that sort of gave us the check mark that our approach worked. So then we started going. But the really critical path item at Madsen for ramp up is pulling more tons out of the mine. So that has to do with accessing more areas. So as you're ramping up, you have to spend time you have to commit miners to driving tunnels to new areas. That's mining, but it's mining unmineralized rock, right? Because you're just driving towards a new area. So you have to get access to more areas. And then in this news release that we put out actually just this morning, I talked a lot about material movement. So apologies if that sounds really dry, but to me, it's actually very exciting because, when it comes to a mine like Madsen, you're pulling mineralized rock from approximately 500 meters depth. That's the heart of our working area right now is at that depth. And so you've got to move those tons of rock out, and you have to deal with both the ore and the waste rock, the tons that you mine to make those tunnels. And so until very recently, we were trucking all of those tons out of the mine. And trucking is the biggest cost of an underground gold mine like Madsen. And so one of the things that we've really been pushing towards is reducing the number of tons that we have to truck out of the mine. And so we achieved a big milestone for that in the middle of September when we were able to start, I'll just say, shoving waste rock into historic underground voids. So like I say, there was this historic mine at Madsen. A lot of those old mined out areas are already backfilled because the miners had the same idea that we did. Don't truck it all out if you don't have to. Put it into the old mined out areas if you can. But there's some that are empty. And as we got deep enough and we're able to get in, assess them, measure them, test the competency, then we're now filling one of those voids in particular, which is very, very large, with a mixture of cemented rock fill and direct dumping. So we've reduced the number. We're not trucking waste out of the mine anymore. As of literally 3 weeks ago, we're not trucking waste out of the mine anymore. If you think about every 42-ton truck takes an hour to get out of the mine. And, we were trucking 600 to 1,200 tons a day in a 24-hour period of waste out of the mine. We don't have to do that anymore. Very significant accomplishment that we're now able to shove that into a void underground. So that's one example of a thing that we needed to get going, an operational component that we needed to get into place so that the mine was operating the way that we need the mine to operate. The shaft is the next one. Similar concept. There is a historic shaft at Madsen all the way down to 1,300 meters. We rehabilitated the structure of the shaft late last year. And then in the middle of this year, we sort of checked our boxes and realized we could move material up that shaft. So we ordered the components and we're waiting for literally the bucket that the new rope attaches to show up. And when that skip shows up, then we expect to be able to start moving 350 tons a day of ore up the shaft. Again, we're trying to move 700 tons of ore a day out of the mine. Half of it now as of November, should be able to go up the shaft. Again, big, important achievement in terms of getting tons out the door. So those are some good examples of the things that we have to get into place. And there's just time frames that are involved in those. You also have to, you order all of your equipment, but it's not all available the second you order it. So we're still waiting for our last 42-ton truck. We're still waiting for a couple of our scoops. So yeah, those are the components that you're really getting into place. So you have operational stability before you say, okay, we did it. This mine is up and running.
Yeah, I guess you can't order that stuff on Amazon Prime and have it show up the next day.
The next day delivery is not a thing. Not for 42-ton haul trucks.
Yeah. Well, thanks for walking us through some of the intricacies of mining that I'm sure people again, those investment bankers, and you go into the boardrooms and they just how can you ramp up more tons, and they don't
Mhm.
even put a thought to, well, what does it actually take to move things out of underground?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
thanks for walking us through that. Sounds like that shaft is going to be is going to deliver quite a lot of operational efficiency. Be able to do that, and then the waste material being able to separate it underground. That sounds like we've got good things to look forward to in future sort of financial kind of results. You did put out a good good news release, well written, answered a lot of questions for me. I would imagine that we, as shareholders, we do have a little bit of things to look forward to, and that is, quarterly sort of updates. When you're in a ramp up, should as you've got more levers to pull to improve efficiency, get more tons, you should produce more gold. Maybe you could kind of walk us through kind of what you just announced here in terms of what the update was all about.
Yeah, for sure. So, we started up the mine, like I said, at the end of May. So if you think of the second quarter of the year, that really covered like the bulk sample and the first 5 weeks of operations. And then the third quarter of the calendar year covered the 3 months of that's been the heart of ramp up to date, if you want to say it like that. And so, the news release that we put out this morning, gave the results for what we accomplished in the third quarter. And so in that third quarter, we poured 7,055 ounces of gold. And that came from rock that averaged 5.4 grams per ton gold. Now that we're on the call, I can't remember the exact tonnage. I think it's 13,000 and something tons. But this is the first interview I've done since putting out that news release. So amazingly, that number is not there. It was 13,000 and something tons, averaging 5.4 grams per ton gold. And so we are really happy with that. So in the second quarter, the production was 5,000 and something. And in the third quarter, it was over 7,000 ounces of gold poured. And so, we're increasing the amount of gold that we're pulling out of the ground. I know people will say, well, the bulk sample wasn't really mining. It was, when we talk about ramping up an operation, the bulk sample was the first step of that. We got our crews, we got underground, we figured out how to physically operate the mine. We got people trained. We got the structures set up, the hierarchies of the people. There's a lot that goes into finding good people and then, organizing them and motivating them and making sure that that's all happening the way that it needs to. So the bulk sample was absolutely part of ramp up. And so we're really happy with that progression. Do we, like all investors, wish that it could happen faster? Of course we do. Like, we're as anxious to produce more gold into this market as anybody. But we are really focused on doing this right. I mean, I don't want to bark up an old tree, but like, if we look at the past version of Madsen, main reason that they cut corners is they were in a rush. So they tried to get this thing going faster and it didn't work. And so we're really committed because of that lesson, and just because, we're miners. We understand what you need, the boxes that you need to check as you march along towards production. We're very focused on doing this methodically so that we can build a robust operation because, to sound like a broken record, we want to be a growing mid-tier miner in this market, and we need to have a strong foundation for that. So we need Madsen to be a mine that's steady, operating, and that we can build a Red Lake base of operations upon. So we want to do it faster, but we're doing it as fast as we can, ensuring that we check the boxes that need to be checked. And it's exciting. It's gratifying to see it happen, especially this transition in the second half of September as we started to see tonnages out of the mine really ramp up.
So it's 35,700 tons.
There we go. That makes more sense than 13. That was not the right number at all.
Yeah, because that would have been really high grade.
Yeah.
If you 1,000 ounces of gold out of 13, that would be mind-bogglingly high. Still very high grade, still very good, 5.4 grams per ton. So do you know how many shifts you guys are sort of running? How like does it how's it running in terms of the average day? And I
Yeah.
know that you did have, unfortunately, a bit of a shutdown for a period of time due to an issue. But over that sort of Q3, I'm just sort of wondering how many days of operation, so we could maybe average and figure out how many tons were sort of moved in a day.
Yeah, fair enough. So, I mean, we do operate every day. There was the shutdown. The incident was the fatality at the mine that happened in the middle of June. And we were shut down. I believe the mine itself was shut down for about a week, maybe not quite a week. The mill was shut down for a bit less time. We had some stockpiles that we started the mill up and just were feeding that. I would say that the biggest, so we have been operating consistently since then, but we did, I would say, a little later than you might realize. So that incident happened in the middle of June. And really in August is when we started to really absorb the labor force impacts of that June situation, which is to say in August is when it settled in. Okay, these are the miners who are not returning to West Red Lake. They don't want to come back to the Madsen Mine. These are who we have to replace. So there was, as much as we were operating for consistently, from when we restarted, through July and August, not all of our shifts were fully staffed because we were navigating those labor force impacts. So that absolutely feeds into the tonnage situation. But yeah, in general, we run 12-hour shifts. Miners, there's a 6 a.m. meeting every day. That's when the miners show up and get their marching orders for the day. The blasts generally happen at about 5 a.m. and p.m. And the way that works, everybody gets down, does their work for the day, and the last thing that's done is you set up for blast, and then everybody exits the mine for shift change, and the blasts happen when nobody's down there. So that's the general lay of the land for the mine, is 12-hour shifts that happen consistently. And
so if we took 35,700 and we don't know the exact, I don't have the exact number of days, but it would be approximately 90-ish, 91, 92, something like
a
that.
little bit. Yeah.
Maybe a little less because you
Maybe
were
a little less. Yeah.
Yeah, let's take 90 for example. Gives you 397 tons on an average day. And you have that thing rated to produce what? How much can it process, the mill?
Yeah. So there's a good bunch of information that we can dive into here. So yes, for sure, about 400 tons per day of ore coming out of the mine. That's for sure the average that you get to with that calculation. I talked before about material movement a lot because we weren't just moving 400 tons of ore a day out of the mine. We were also moving, 6 to 1,200 tons of waste a day out of the mine.
Right.
Sometimes more because we were doing that development to get into additional areas, right? So some days the ore production was actually very modest. And because we were focusing on getting this development done or getting a secondary egress out of a major mining area, right? These are the things that you have to balance during ramp up. So that's those are the components into tonnage. And then in terms of the mill, there's a couple numbers here. So the mill is built to process 1,100 tons a day. And for pure gold, it ran up to 1,200 tons a day. It has always been permitted to 800 tons per day, which is to say the average over a year has to not exceed 800 tons per day for the permit. And that's based in the way that the tailings dam and water treatment facility and permit all work together. So we are pushing Madsen towards 800 tons per day. That's our goal. 650, 700 end of the year, that's a more realistic. And then gunning up the last step in 2026, that's probably a realistic expectation. Changing the permit so that we can process 1,200 tons per day is not a high barrier. And you'll notice that the difference, 400 to 800 tons per day, that 400 ton per day difference is exactly how much the Rowan project will produce. So the concept here is to advance that project to pre-feasibility, do a joint pre-feasibility with Madsen and Rowan certainly by this time next year. That will answer the engineering questions that feeds the permits both to build Rowan and to increase the capacity of the permit at Madsen. So I probably got ahead of you with some questions there, but your question.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I was trying to point to is that we've got maybe some other good quarters to look forward to as you ramp things up. But you've definitely you've set the stage for some good questions here, so we can kind of talk about this sort of second project, which also was one of the newsworthy items that sort of happened since we last chatted.
Yeah.
And put out some interesting numbers and things like that. But anyway, so I was just sort of pointing out, like, yes, you're in a ramp up, you're not fully operational, so maybe investors, we should look for, what's going to happen in Q4, what's going to happen in Q1 next year. So looks like you again, if things continue along and that you'll probably produce more gold and take advantage of these historically fantastic sort of gold prices. So you might get more per ounce than you did the previous quarter.
I mean, $4,000 is unreal. But yes, for sure, we do absolutely expect the ounce production per month to increase in the fourth quarter, now that we have that one major operational thing in place, the waste rock situation, and then pending we have the shaft. Those things really matter. So yes, your outlook is bang on.
So one of the things that's going to maybe be a little bit of a handcuff when mining's tough, and you got capital expenditures, and you got new equipment, and you got labor, and you got to pay to attract people. You got all this sort of like ramp up stuff. It's going to be pretty costly. So in terms of like your all-in sustaining costs, your sort of cost per ounce to sort of produce, those are typically really ugly results for a new sort of mine. Have you guys put any information out to the market in terms of that yet?
No, and I mean it's not. I mean, I don't think any mine in ramp up puts that information out to the market, because you have all these unusual costs. They're not part of regular operations, and so if you put out an all-in sustaining cost right now, it wouldn't reflect what you expect the mine to do once you finish all the tasks that are part of getting it to that state. So no, we haven't talked about costs yet, and no mine would until, that's the real weight of announcing commercial production, is that then you open up your books and say, here, this is what it's costing to do it here. And you give guidance too. The other key thing when you announce commercial production is you also say, we're doing it, and here's what we are going to do for the next 12 months. So you lay out very clear milestones. And then the market can hold you to account to meet those milestones.
So the question everybody's asking you, I'm going to ask you, and you're probably going to hate it, but I have to ask. So how many ounces do you think you'll produce this year, 2025?
Oh, this year? Yeah, I don't.
Partial year.
Let's see. What are we at? We've produced 13,000 already. I mean, I think we've been saying 25,000 ounces in 2025. Like Shane and I have said that in interviews round and about, and we're comfortable with that number. That's sort of what we're gunning for this year. That's in line with increasing from 30% from what we produced and adding it on. So yeah, in that range is what we're gunning for.
2026. What do you like when this thing is sort of fully operational, and looking at the sort of average grade that you're kind of getting? Being a little bit conservative, putting you on the spot on this podcast. What do you think for 2026? What are you guys stating anything, or is that something that would just be irresponsible to chat about?
It would be irresponsible for me as the vice president to put a number on that before we've given official guidance. What I will say is, you see the grades that we're producing at right now. 5.5, call it 5.5 grams. That's in line with what the bulk sample was at, right? So that's a pretty good touchstone for what grade will be. If you look at our pre-feasibility study, the grade was higher. And it's really important for everyone to understand that that's a choice. We are mining bigger areas at lower cost than the pre-feasibility study outlined in its mine plan. So it is a choice to mine at 5.5 grams instead of 7.5 grams, which is about what the average grade was going to be in the first few years of operation based on that pre-feasibility study mine plan. So if you take that grade difference as a percent, go from 7.5 or 7.3 down to 5.5, and you maybe apply that to the ounce production profile that the pre-feasibility study had, which was 60 to 65,000 ounces a year, depending on the year. Sure. That'll get you your estimate for what we expect to be producing in 2026.
So a little bit less than your PFS.
Yeah, because we're choosing to produce less because that'll get us. We're going to mine more of the deposit. We're going to have a longer mine life, and we're going to do it at lower
Ah,
cost.
there we go. That might be the reason.
Yeah,
Longer mine life.
longer mine life, mine more of the deposit, and do it all at lower cost. This is the net benefit of the decision.
So we're going to jump around a little bit. I'm going to sort of skip on to, you kind of touched on it, Rowan. So let's sort of talk about this Rowan project. You put out a PEA in September. This is, so why don't you explain what Rowan's all about, where it's located, sort of how it fits into the whole equation?
Absolutely. I'm super excited to talk about Rowan. I'm very excited to talk about Rowan increasingly over the next year. As we were getting Madsen up and going, we didn't talk about Rowan at all, which is fair. We had a big thing that we were doing and we were focused on that big thing. But as we did that big thing, we did a little bit of work on the small thing, which is our project that's only 30 kilometers away as the crow flies, just up to the northwest. It's 80 kilometers by road because you go around the end of the lake. And that's the Rowan Project. And Rowan it has not a huge deposit, but it has a lovely deposit. Remember the indicated grade at the Madsen Mine averages 7.5 grams per ton gold. The Rowan deposit, again, it's only about 350,000 ounces. But the indicated, which is about 200,000 ounces, the indicated grade up there is 12.8 grams per ton gold. It's a really nicely mineralized deposit. And not only does it have that really nice grade, it's sort of shaped for mining, which is to say it starts at surface, it's basically vertical, it's relatively wide, and it's pretty consistent. So those are all the characteristics you want when you're designing an underground gold mine. So we did that. We wrapped an initial mine plan around Rowan and we published that in July. The concept of that mine plan is build an underground mine, develop Rowan into a standalone underground mine. So that would be develop underground mine. There would be a small camp there for the workers of that site. There would be a water treatment facility because of course you're pumping water out of a mine. There'd be the equipment for that. And that's about what there would be there. Then you would load the mineralization into trucks and you would truck that. Now, we phrase it in the PEA as to another operating mill in the area. We certainly expect that to be the Rowan or the Madsen mill. We just, until we have officially done a joint technical report, we can't say for sure. We can't assume. We can't,
Right.
make that as a blanket statement. But certainly our concept is truck that mineralization down to Madsen, where, like we just said before, the mill has that exactly the right additional capacity. We expect the PEA for Rowan had it pushing 400 tons per day out of the portal. And guess what? There's 400 tons per day of additional capacity that we can permit at the Madsen mill. So that's the concept. And I'm really excited about it because it would only cost $70 million to get that up and going. That $70 million generates a better than 40% IRR after tax. And it is expected to add 35,000 ounces a year to our Red Lake production profile. So, going back to the beginning of our conversation, the driving principle at West Red Lake is to be a growing gold producer in this market. And Rowan is it's a really important part of that. And timing matters here. So we've done over 2 years of baseline work, 2.5 years of baseline environmental data up there. Now that we have this PEA done, the process here is upgrade that to that PFS, the joint one with Madsen. That will create all the engineering answers to the permitting questions so that by this time next year, we can be submitting the permit to do the mine at Madsen and the permit to do the mill, to run the mill at the higher capacity at 1,200 tons per day. And then these are in the province of Ontario. The province of Ontario has been talking a lot about expedited permitting processes. Our vice president of environment and community met with the mining minister in Ontario a couple weeks ago. That was a pretty positive conversation that built our optimism that we should be able to permit Rowan faster than, past projects of similar style have been permitted in Ontario. So all of that comes together to say that we think we're going to be sending mineralization from Rowan to Madsen in 2028, which is not that long from now.
I'd hate to have the job being the permitting person for your company. A lot of pressure.
No pressure, but make it happen.
You can pass that pressure that you felt trying to get Madsen, which was permitted, back into production.
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody's just chomping at the bit. When is this gonna? When will you be able to get these last things out of the way and start, toll processing Madsen? Sounds like it's going to be a few years away with some methodical steps that you need to take, joint technical, probably, fairly, a better path for permitting than maybe we had. We're sort of in this reshoring, sort of everybody's trying to have their own source of metals and
exactly.
and whatnot. So we got a good backdrop, but sounds like a bit of time there. Very interesting, super high grade. So more than double the sort of grade that you're currently producing at Madsen. So that should certainly help increase the sort of in a combined scenario, which I can talk about, you guys can't, but in a combined scenario, that could be pretty exciting in terms of a future growth sort of profile.
For sure. And I mean, yeah, for sure. And I mean, there's lots of upside at Rowan as well, right? We've done one small drill program at Rowan, which was really an infill drill program. We got this project from essentially the way the company came together is that we used the company that had the Rowan project, and then, used that as the way to bring the private company that bought Madsen, to market. Great matchup, obviously, because it put the two projects into the same company. Our team then did an initial drill program at Rowan because we weren't ready to get started at Madsen yet. And we made the resource our own. So that was mostly an infill drill program. We expect to soon start drilling at Rowan again. I'm sure we will talk about the financing shortly, but part of the financing that we just did was flow through money, and that money is for Rowan. So we're going to go up to Rowan and we're going to do some more infill because we need to get ready for the PFS. But there's also some really good expansion holes that we're excited to complete. There's lots of potential that we see for Rowan to become more than what it is right now. So we love the opportunity that Rowan offers to increase the amount of gold that we produce in Red Lake, for sure. And for a while, we think.
Well, we only got 13 minutes left before you got to hop to your next meeting, so we better sort of cram some stuff in. Okay. Why don't we finish off Rowan sort of, and then we're going to hop back to Madsen and talk about South Austin and other targets and things like that. But why don't we finish off Rowan? So what's sort of you kind of hinted on it, you mentioned it, but if you need to just wrap it up, what would be sort of the next steps that investors could sort of watch for in relation to Rowan over the next 6 months?
Yeah, for sure. So we expect to start drilling there pretty darn soon. And about 30% of the ounces that are in the PEA mine plan are inferred. And so we have to infill drill those to bring them to the higher confidence level so that they can be part of a pre-feasibility level mine plan. So there's some infill drilling. There's also a really interesting portion of the deposit that didn't make it into the mine plan. It's called vein 6B. It didn't make it in because the drilling there is really historic, and those operators didn't assay anything other than the really obvious quartz veins, which that sort of patchy database was not substantial enough to make it into the mine plan. That's the way the engineering worked. But we have pretty strong expectation that a few infill drill holes will pull that portion of the deposit into the mine plan. 6B has 50,000 ounces at it, and it's much closer to where the portal will be driven. So like the amount of time that you have to spend developing before you start mining gets cut in half, like 6 months instead of a year. So when we talk about trying to make Rowan happen soon, the speed of permitting in Ontario and pulling vein 6B into the mine plan, those two, could change things by like a year, bring it a year closer. So that's what's coming at Rowan is a drill program at Rowan. And then we will march that thing through pre-feasibility with the aim of putting out that joint PFS, certainly by this time next year.
Excellent. And let's jump back here to Madsen, and then we can get into some financial, talk cap table and finances and stuff like that. You announced some pretty eye-watering, eye-popping, amazingly high-grade, broad width sort of results at South Austin. For those of the viewers that aren't sort of familiar, and I lose track of it myself, you've got a couple of major sort of like targets, or I guess ore bodies within Madsen. So would you mind sort of listing those off, and then explaining a bit about how important South Austin is?
Yeah, for sure. So it is confusing. I mean, we call it the Madsen deposit. It's actually made of South Austin, Austin, and a little bit in North Austin. And then there's a few other areas called like Durlac. And then there's the Fork one that's beside. So it's confusing. I
Now
can,
I'm more confused.
now you're even more confused. Oops. The best, to distill it down, the key, by far the largest parts of the deposit is the main plunging zone that's called Austin, and then the parallel plunging one that's called South Austin. They really just move down side by side like this. And there's a lot of resource in both of them. The mine plan goes back and forth with both of them. There's also another third one that's called North Austin, that's a bit more patchy, but there is some mining already scheduled there, and we have lots of hope to delineate more mining over there. In South Austin, what we did is we went in there and did what we always do, which is definition drilling, tightening up that drill hole spacing from 20 meters to 7 meters ahead of mine design, because that's what we need to do to inform a sufficiently accurate and high enough resolution model to be able to mine this thing effectively. That's what we do. We tighten up the drill hole spacing. So we went into South Austin to do that. Now, of course, when we're deciding which areas to target for definition drilling, we like areas that have potential for particularly high grade, right? There's a million meters of drilling into the Madsen deposit, if you include all the historic and whatever. So there's a lot of data to work with. So our geologists certainly have their areas that they're keener about. And this part of South Austin was one such area. And so, through the first half of the year, we definitely issued some eye-watering results from South Austin. There's no doubt 12 grams of 60 meters, 10 grams of 114 meters, 18 grams of 24 meters. I'm doing these by memory, so apologies to the regulators if I got some of those numbers a little bit wrong. But those are the ballpark sort of numbers, highlight numbers that we were getting. And there's two reasons that this matters. First of all, Red Lake rocks are a lot of work. You have to do all this definition drilling. But they can be very much worth the work because they can carry these grades, right? And so these results are a reminder of that. The Red Lake mine down the road that built Goldcorp, it's operated for over 70 years. And a good number of those years have been really phenomenal years because of grade. It's not because they dramatically expanded the operation or anything like that. It's because they quite regularly encountered these pockets of particularly rich mineralization, and those pockets would feed amped up year or 2 years of production. And so we're really keen that we've found the first such pocket of ours at Madsen, which is this portion of South Austin. And this we're going to be mining. We start mining there in December, right? We're already doing the development it's in the mine plan for December, and it's going to be a significant part of what we mine in the first half of next year. So the fact that we found one and the fact that we're mining it very soon, that's why we're so excited about South Austin. Now, we have other areas that the geologists really want to get to and see similar potential to what we've found in South Austin. I would say that the next set for sure of drill results that will come out will be from an area called the 904 complex, which is down lower in Austin's. And that's another area where our geologists were like, let's go there. And so that's an area that we've gone to, and we're pretty excited about the potential that we see in that part of the deposit as well.
So would it be fair to say that maybe using 5.5 grams or 5.4 grams as an average might understate the case when there may be other higher grade areas which could elevate the average sort of grade? Or what do you say about that? Is that something that investors might speculate on?
I think investors do speculate on that. I'd say that certainly over the life of mine, I think that that's a reasonable speculation. not necessarily for 2026, because we're still sort of working with what we've got, where we can get to and whatever. But as we get deeper into this deposit and we increasingly get below the areas that have been mined before, the potential for finding these kinds of lenses increases and the ease of mining increases. So yes, over, the coming years that we're operating at Madsen, I'd say that's a reasonable speculation.
Well, let's sort of get to the wrap up here. I've got a gazillion questions, but we're going to have to sort of like edit down just because I know you're busy. And thanks for spending some time. So, yeah, you guys went and announced, I think, around a $30 million financing. You upped it, oversubscribed it, close on $41 million. I think was that Canadian? Was that the Canadian amount? So congrats on that. It wasn't, I know before West Red Lake had sort of, you look 10 years younger now, but I know in the past, there'd been quite a bit of stress when there was this perception that there was a surprise financing and everybody thought, well, you guys are going to be a gold producer. What do you need more money for? So I think this one was better telemarked and or expected by investors. You'd gone quite a while without needing some capital. Maybe you could explain a bit about how that process was, what the investor mix was sort of like. Again, you don't have to name any names, nothing that you need to, unless you're able to. But how did that go in this sort of more bullish sort of environment?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, we had been very careful with our words since the last financing, which was back in February. And the words we kept using were, we expect that we have the capital to complete the ramp up of the Madsen mine as planned, right? To put this mine back into production. And that remains true even as we were financing, like doing this recent financing. So what I'm saying there is that we could have done it. We could have gotten it through on the plan that we had. But, I feel a bit like a broken record right now, but like, I'm going to say again, the idea here is to produce more gold sooner in general, right? That's the West Red Lake thesis, the investment thesis that drives the company is how quickly can we produce more gold to give our shareholders the best leverage to this gold market? And when we considered that question, the opportunity to bring in some new capital now was, seemed like the right thing to do. There's some projects at the mine that we wouldn't have started until maybe the middle of next year. A ventilation project, a repower project, another component to the shaft, that we can now start sooner because we don't have to wait until we have that we're in operational stability and we have that reliable cash flow. We can do it now. That pulls forward the potential to produce more at Madsen. We raised those $5 million of flow through so that we can do the work at Rowan. Really important for bringing those 35,000 ounces of annual production here on schedule. We also want to get deeper at Madsen sooner because, the deposit at Madsen goes to about 1,200 meters depth. The Red Lake mine and others in the area go to 3 kilometers, right? And we have scattered hits down there. We have lots of expectation that this thing just carries on. And if we want to engineer and unlock Madsen 2.0 or Madsen Deeps, whatever you want to call it, in this gold bull market, we got to start drilling it reasonably soon. So that means getting deeper, doing some lateral drive so that we can start drilling down there. So these are all the reasons that more capital now felt like the right idea based on our investment thesis. And if ramp up continues smoothly and or the gold price stays at $4,000 and we end up with perhaps more capital, extra capital on hand, we can put that to paying down debt, which again, the reason that you want a rising production profile is for free cash flow. And so if we can pay down debt, then that increases the free cash flow argument. So it was all really related to the investment thesis that we did that. And as for interest, there was lots, and it was really cool to see some new funds come in that are more about the more advanced stories, because that's what we are now. And then quite a few just long West Red Lake shareholders that wanted to increase their exposure.
And this one was a little different. This was a no warrant deal, right?
Yes. No more warrants.
Yep. You graduated.
We grew up.
So post-closing, what does that leave your sort of cap table looking like now? How many shares sort of issued outstanding, and what are you approximately fully diluted?
Yeah. So we got 392 million issued and outstanding, and 164 million warrants is, I believe, the number right now. As most watchers here will know, a lot of those warrants trade and, and sort of have lives and values of their own, which is interesting. Of that warrant table, if you flip to the table in the presentation, you'll note that there are 43 million warrants with an exercise price of $1 that expire in May. So if we can continue to substantiate, a re-rating of West Red Lake to, from here a little bit higher, there could be some significant warrant exercise proceeds that come into the company in the first half of next year. And there's a lot we could do to unlock value for investors with that, whether it's pulling forward value at Madsen, paying off debt, acquiring something else in the Red Lake region, or going farther afield and seeing what else we can find to become a mid-tier producer.
So would it be right to assume that you'd be sitting with more than $40 million in your treasury right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any stated number that you're able to talk about approximately, or do you just have to go off with financials and then add in?
Yeah, we just go off of financials. Again, it gets to all of this, not talking about financials until you're in commercial production. So yeah, just, the amount of money we just put in the bank, and we weren't dry because, as I said, we could have got through.
Great. I'm sure people are bugging you. It's a great M&A environment. Planning on buying anything else?
I mean, it's on the second or third slide of our presentation. We're putting Madsen into commercial production. That's our first goal and the most market obvious goal. We want to expand our production hub in Red Lake. That's the second goal, happening at the same time. The third thing that's also happening is looking at for what else we can do. If gold markets lasted forever and there was not increasing competition for acquisitions during those markets, then maybe you would do things sequentially. We would finish Madsen and then, but that's not the case, right? There is significantly increased competition for assets as a gold bull market increases. So if we want to become a mid-tier gold miner in this market, we have to be looking. Who knows if, when, what, how that would, that could turn into something, but we're certainly always looking.
And would that jurisdiction look outside of Canada, or you're looking to stay within Canada?
I think the Americas is probably, we would love to stay in Canada, but the pickings are a little bit slim. So our key drivers are to find a producing mine where our skill set can unlock value. So a mine that's been overshadowed and a mid-tier in a larger portfolio, a mine that's maybe been undercapitalized or hasn't had the build, operate expertise that we have. Where can we unlock value? And with a producing asset.
I can only imagine in this market, there's a gazillion people clamoring to show you different projects and come up with different ideas. So I'd imagine the deal flow is not lacking.
Yeah, our corp dev VP is a busy guy.
Well, that we've kept you sort of over time. I really appreciate the time, Gwen. Just to the last quick summary, we're going to sort of leave it here. Last sort of question. Why should investors consider West Red Lake today?
I think that investors in West Red Lake have been really focused, understandably, on is Madsen working? And I think we are consistently, and will especially in the fourth quarter, sort of clarify that question. We internally have a lot of confidence that Madsen is working, and we're getting to the point where the market is going to believe us on that fully. As that happens, then I think the market will open up a little bit and say, oh, wow, there's also 35,000 ounces a year coming from Rowan in only 2 years. That's a significant base of operations for a new mining company. So I think that the understanding of the value that we're building, there's a potential for that to really sort of increase over the next little while as we underline, what we've done at Madsen.
Excellent. Well, enjoy your conference. Thanks for fitting us in. Rest up when you can. Try to get into that time zone, and thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Good to catch up.
Thank you so much. This was a great conversation. Take care.